Hello and welcome to Better Together. My name is Tony.
And I'm Kimberly.
And we want to talk to you a little bit today. We want to continue a conversation that we started about communication. We call it Bridging the Gap, Enhancing Communication, because we work with so many people and we have our own struggles in the area of communication, you can imagine. But I work with so many people and encounter so many couples that have difficulty communicating. And one of the huge reasons and that people, I believe, have big problems communicating effectively is because of an inability to listen and have empathy. And that becomes very, very important, especially if you're going to have a successful relationship. So how important is listening and empathy when it comes to communication?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you for you to define empathy. What is empathy? Because I feel like my definition of empathy is being able to put yourself in the situation of someone else without having experienced it intimately yourself. Is that empathy?
Maybe that's sympathy. Sympathy is maybe you don't have a personal experience, but you can be intentional about having sympathy. Empathy is a little bit different. It's the idea of putting on that person's shoes and walking a mile in those shoes. But you may be able to have empathy with somebody who's going through something, and I'll just throw this out there. It's actually going to be one of the things that we discuss. So even if you haven't experienced exactly what they've experienced, you can still have empathy if you're able to effectively relate that to something that you have experienced, even though it's different. You can become empathetic because of a like experience, even if it's not the exact same thing. That's something that we have as human beings. That's just an ability that we have. So let's talk about the role of active listening and empathy in the context of effective communication. We have learned that for me, it is very difficult to stop, to slow down, and to listen very, very clearly so that I understand exactly what she's communicating. My mind goes fast. Now, her mind is a little different. It goes everywhere. She is wires. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how she does it, so it's very difficult for me sometimes to listen. So we have some techniques and some things we want to share with you concerning.
So that going everywhere skill is diminishing.
So what's the difference between hearing and listening? Let's start with that.
Okay, so I feel like the difference between hearing is you're hearing, like, I would be hearing what you're saying, but I'm not internalizing or thinking about anything.
Wah, 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 wah. You know, it's so funny. I was talking to my daughter today, and I was what's it called when you do? I was multitasking, and a lot of guys, maybe you're different, don't multitask very well. So she's talking, and I'm working on something, and she said, "Are you listening to me?" I said, "Yeah, I hear you." And then I looked at her and asked the question to the answer she had just given me. And another person in the room and her just broke out laughing. I said, "Listen, I said I was hearing you. I didn't say I was listening to you."
Oh, I wish I had been in the room. Yeah. I was not that other person.
Oh, yeah. Well, I heard a little snippet and it didn't register exactly, but I think we do that so many times. We hear kind of what's going on, but we're not processing it deeply.
Right, and I hear very well then. If that's in the context of that definition, I hear very well. But I'm not paying attention. I have that. That's a cool skill. I have the skill of hearing.
Yes, I have the skill of hearing. Now, how do we improve our techniques for listening? That's the question. So what great, incredible advice do we have for those who want to increase and enhance their communication skills? For inquiring minds. So what techniques do we have for listening actively?
So the one that I could bring to the table would be in order to do active listening, well, I'm the one that's going to be listening to what you're saying, and I'm going to be understanding, but I'm not going to be judging you or trying to fix you. I am listening to what you're having to say.
Okay, first
not
of all,
interrupting.
That's impossible for a man. You cannot present us with a problem without us thinking about a solution. I shouldn't say it's impossible, but guys, you know it's true. When a problem is out there, we are fixers and our mind immediately goes to solutions. And that's hard.
And actually, I have seen probably even I have watched that dynamic play out when I'm seeing two people communicate, and actually it could be like a man and a woman, but especially in that context where she just wants you to listen, not you per se, but anyone to listen, and then the guy will say something and she shuts down, or it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we can learn. A technique is listen completely, because very often we want to offer, and it may be a situation where they do need help or they are looking for an answer, but when you offer an answer before you have the details, before you have all of the information, I think you do yourself a disservice and you do the other person a disservice. There's a technique called mirroring. There's a technique called that really helps people understand that helps me listen. I will say to Kim in the middle of a conversation, so what you're saying is, and then I'll repeat it, and I'll just tell you, sometimes what she is saying and what I'm hearing is two very different things.
Right.
So at that point, you either make a course correction in the conversation, but that is actively engaging. Now it's tough sometimes with us, because I'm a one thing at a time kind of person. Kim, like I said, she can deal with 5 topics. So I have to stop sometimes and say, okay, back up. Let me ask a question. Let me ask a question about this thing before you go on, or let me verify a statement that you made, because I'll get hung up in that conversation. She'll say something and she goes off and starts talking, and I'm stuck back here. I'm going, hang on, can I? That's important. It's important to be able to say, okay, can you pause before we go any further and this gets ugly? Can we verify I'm trying to listen? And that's huge. I think if she lets me know that she doesn't understand, not that she's being argumentative, but she's just trying to understand, how does that, because I do that with you sometimes. That's important. How does it make you feel when you know I'm trying to understand what you're saying?
So sometimes it depends on my mood.
Aren't we transparent?
See, there we go. I just changed it. I wanted to know.
Yeah, but that's true, and that's a factor when it comes to marriage and relationship. It does.
Right. But for the most part, I do appreciate that aspect. Your willingness to try to understand where I'm coming from, and when you give me the when you share what you think you're hearing, and then you give me the opportunity to verbalize, no, that's not what I'm saying. Yeah,
and another aspect I think with communication that can take you a long ways, guys, in dealing with your women is validation. And same thing, ladies. When the guy says something, or your wife says something, and you're trying to get that communication to validate, not necessarily whether it's right or wrong or their opinion, but very often what they say is, man, you know what, that really kind of hurt my feelings, or what they said really made me angry. And you can validate that feeling without validating that situation, and that's important, because not all of our feelings are appropriate, and not all of our responses are always appropriate, but that's not necessarily what we want to say at the front of that conversation, or that fight it may become your fight.
Man, and I would say when you validate what I'm feeling, not that you agree with it, but you validate how I'm feeling, it opens up and allows me to share more, and then we become closer, and it's kind of exponential.
And that kind of leads into the next idea, which is the role of empathy and understanding. I think when it comes to communication, one thing I consider effective communication, not just the transfer of information. And you need to hear this. Effective communication is not just the transfer of information, me saying it and her getting it. Effective communication becomes the sharing of an experience and a perception or perspective. And that's when you can really use empathy, or where empathy really becomes important. Like we were saying before, I may not have experienced exactly what she's going through, but I can guarantee you I have experienced those feelings or those emotions in a different circumstance. So I know what it feels like to feel that way, even if the circumstances surrounding that may be different. And who was it? A great leader. He said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that in relationship with effective communication, it's not a matter of trying to prove a point or be right or just help them get over something. We want to grow and grow together and allow the experience, good or bad or ugly, to enhance our ability to communicate with each other. And this takes practice. I mean, we have blown it. We have failed when it comes to effective communication, epically at times.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say, and maybe you can speak to this, very often some of our biggest fights were over the smallest issues.
Oh, yeah. Miscommunication.
Yeah.
That's,
A misunderstanding, a defensive posture that was taken too quickly, a lack of being empathetic to a situation that she felt deeply over that I may not have thought was very important.
yeah.
Yeah. So what are some common barriers to active listening, and how do we overcome them?
Ooh. Well, a common barrier.
TV. Turn off the TV. Eliminate distractions when you're having a conversation.
Yes. I mean, hey, he took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
I was like, eliminating distractions straight up.
Yeah, I think you said it earlier too, trying to jump to a conclusion and fix it prematurely.
Yeah, I think a good thing that, I don't know how much we practice it currently, but back in the day, it used to be like couch time.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where we would just turn off all distractions, sit on the couch together. Maybe it was for 5 minutes.
Right.
And then just talk to each other
Right.
about the day.
Yeah. So barriers to actively listening, thinking about what your response is going to be as opposed to assessing the information. I am so
Yes.
guilty of that, and in a lot of counseling situations, I try to avoid that by keeping notes. By kind of staying on task, actively listening, making sure I'm following a progression. I think that's important. Some of the distractions can be your phone. Some of the distractions can be, this is a huge one, secondary and tertiary topics can be huge distractions to effective communication. When you have too many rabbit trails on something specific that you're trying to communicate with,
Ooh,
yeah.
that's good.
And very often those rabbit trails are invoked or the result of feelings that you get during, conversation. If you assume that the person you're communicating with has a particular position that's already hostile, you're going to shut down. And if it's not received, that's a huge barrier. Our tendency to feel like we're not being heard and to shut down. And so when we're not communicating and we're listening, how do we posture ourselves? Literally, physically, how do you posture yourself in a way that's receptive?
So I feel like for me, I think facing the person and having that eye contact one-on-one does well. Now, I don't necessarily know how well it works, but for you, if that is helpful to you, when I do that.
You looking at me always helps me think at least that you're listening, not just hearing. I mean, it may not be the case. So any exercises you can think of that will help enhance listening skills and empathy? Anything that we can practice?
Okay, well, it's the old game of Simon Says.
Okay.
Okay, believe it or not, where you say something and then you repeat what that other person said.
Okay. And that way they kind of know and you're tracking. That's not like, hey, did you just hear what I said?
Right.
Now repeat it to me so I know that you heard it.
No,
I don't.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that doing that periodically, so what I just heard you say was, again, like I said earlier, we do that. Another thing is I will say, write down as you're listening what's going on. One, it'll help you keep your mouth shut if it's difficult for you to listen, or you love to talk too much, or you're over opinionated, or your communication style is one that is very not assertive. What was our word? Aggressive. So if you have an aggressive communication style, write it down, and that'll kind of help you stay on task and help you actively listen. I do that a lot. I can't emphasize it enough.
So do you have like a key technique? When you say write it down, I'm like, I would want to try to write everything down. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. And then suddenly I wouldn't be listening.
Well, let me warn you, okay? Even if it's with your spouse, they may think you're trying to psychoanalyze them or something. So be careful with that. Just a little word, just to kind of remind you, feeling hurt, so that you can know what to empathize with, or bad experience or anger, at boss. In other words, or at a boss or, somebody. I hope your boss is a nice, great, wonderful boss. But, if they're just whatever will help you kind of stay on task. Another thing, practice it daily. In other words, practice just listening. You'll be amazed, and here's just a little clue. If you will get good at listening, you'll be amazed at what people say. Now, she has an incredible gift when it comes to that. She will ask questions and get quiet, and I usually give her way more information than what I intended to. And I think that's a skill that you can develop in everyday conversation. Closing thought?
I don't have any. That was good.
Listen,
I love what you said.
Communication is huge. Yeah, I mean, you see, we talk over each other, but if this is bringing value to you, please like, subscribe, share this, help us kind of get some of this information out, and work on your communication. Listen, the relationship between a husband and a wife is something that is intended to be beautiful. Our culture may say, you know what, it's the old ball and chain idea. No. You should be ever growing in your communication skills, ever growing in your ability to have empathy and sympathy and true love.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Why? Because we are truly
better together.